ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. In this video, I am going to narrate Adhyatam Upanishad in which spirituality is well explained. This Upanishad, ranking 73 among the total 108 Upanishads, forms a part of Shukla Yajurveda. As the name suggests, this Upanishad treats spiritual knowledge in a very rational and lucid manner, emphasizing the necessity of diligent self-effort coupled with discrimination for attaining non-dual knowledge. This Upanishad disagrees with the view that one cannot work out one's own salvation with independent self-effort and has to rely on some external personal God for attaining immortality. This Upanishad admits no dualistic philosophy and sets aside all such doctrines that are opposed to the non-dual knowledge of Brahma. This Brahma Vidya culminates in Jivan Mukti, liberation in life. The earnest seeker of liberation will find in this Upanishad the boldness and conviction of a true adventurous spirit. Shanti Mantra. Om Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Muddyachate Purnasya Purnamadaaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, that absolute unconditioned Brahma, is infinite, and this conditioned Brahma or universe is infinite. The infinite universe proceeds from the infinite Brahma. Then, realizing the infinitude of the infinite universe, it remains as the infinite Brahma alone. Om, peace, peace, peace. Repudiation of superimposition. Aham mameti yo bhavo deha akshadavantamani adhyaso ayam nirastayvyo vidusa brahmanistaya. This is stanza number 1. The thought I am and mine are the body, the senses, etc. is non-self. The wise man should repudiate this superimposition on the self through steadfast devotion to Brahma. Spirituality is beyond the senses. One who cannot go beyond the body and senses is disqualified for a spiritual life. Identification with the body and senses signifies a fall of our consciousness. This downfall should be avoided by the wise through Brahmanistha, steadfast devotion to Brahma. Stanza or verse number 2. Gyatva svam pratyag atmanam buddhi tad virti sakshanim so ham itev tadritta swatantra matim tajet. knowing one's own self to be the witness of the intellect and its modifications, identifying the I with that self, give up the false impression of self being other than that witness state. Having repudiated the false superimposition of the body and senses on the self, now the repudiation of various modifications of the mind and intellect is taken up. The intellect perceives all the modifications of the mind in the waking and dreaming states but becomes latent in the deep sleep state. Self is the witness of the intellect and never ceases to exist even during the deep sleep state. The intellect is not the proper instrument to fathom the self. Therefore follows the injunction for seekers of the knowledge of the Supreme Spirit to reject the identity with this intellect. Stanza number 3. लोका अनुवर्तनम त्यक्त्वा त्यक्त्वा देह अनुवर्तनम शास्त्र अनुवर्तनम त्यक्त्वा स्वाध्याय सापन्यम कुरु. Giving up the way of the world, that is worldly life, rejecting the cravings of the body and not confining oneself to the injunction of the Shastras, scriptures that do not deal with self-knowledge, do away the superimposition on self. Impure vasanas, innate impulses, produce results that are opposed to self-knowledge. These are said to be of three kinds, which Lok Vasana, Shastra Vasana, and Dehi Vasana. The resolve to lead such a life that will win him people's praises and not censure is called the desire for the world. Worldly people exert themselves for the sake of name, fame, and status in society. It is said to be impure because it binds a person with many family and social obligations. People with such desires do not make any attempt to know their own self but go by ephemeral and transient worldly goals which cause bondage for the soul. Wise people do not tread on the path of the world, rising above the world. Wise people avoid recognition from the world. The desire for learning is related to the study of scriptures, performance of rituals, and knowledge of many disciplines. Attached to such secular and religious learning, people identify themselves with profession, lineage, clan, caste, community, and fail to realize the goal of life. Ritualists go on worshipping many gods and goddesses, but they do not know their own selves. Scholars well versed in the knowledge of science and technology consider themselves superior to those who have a religious inclination. People who are attached to rituals and charity consider self-knowledge as unnecessary and quote various scriptures to justify their hypothesis. It is said to be an impure desire since it is the cause of pride resulting in false notions of superiority and inferiority. Deluded people who delight in such learning fall again and again into old age and death. Desire for the body arises because people want to covet a faultless body. Musicians struggle hard to acquire a melodious voice. Teachers strive to acquire good skills of oration. People use various cosmetics to acquire beauty. Ritualists purify the body by sprinkling and sipping water and the like. This type of vasana is impure because it signifies false identification of the self with the body. Those confounded fools who are in love with this body, which is but a conglomerate of flesh, bones, blood, muscle, etc., will also be fond of hell. Wise seers of truth have thus warned us against pursuing these three types of desires. These three desires, though may appear acceptable to indiscriminating people, are said to be obstacles for the wise in the attachment of self knowledge, rejection of non self, and reflection on self. Stanza number 4. स्वात्मन्येव सदा स्थित्या मनो नश्यति योगिनः युक्तया श्रुत्या स्वानुभूतया ज्ञात्वा सर्वात्मात्मनम्. Knowing through reasoning, scriptures, and one's own experience that there is only one self in all beings, the mind of the yogi becomes extinct as it constantly dwells in self alone. Having set aside the false superimposition on the self, now follows the injunction for the rejection of non self and reflection on the self. The Katha Upanishad, chapter 2, part 2, stanza 11 says, the self that is one alone in all beings is not tainted by the sorrows of the world since it is transcendental. Reflecting thus on the nature of Atma by reasoning in conformity with Shruti, the yogi conquers the mind. A seeker of spiritual knowledge should not pay heed to the illusory advice of anyone and should rely upon his own experiences. Indiscriminative people with a defective vision perceive diversities and entertain various desires on the pretext of duty. Those who are complacent by the doctrine of karma alone never attain the dissolution of the mind mano nasha, as they are preoccupied with various duties. One who makes no effort for dissolution of mind never attains spiritual knowledge. There are two ways to dissolve the mind, one through yoga and other through knowledge. This Upanishad deals with the discriminative knowledge of self and non-self for attaining manonasha. Stanza 5. Nidraya lokvartaya sabd atam vismrite कचिन्नावस्त्रं दत्वा चिन्त्य आत्मा atmani. Without giving the slightest chance to self-oblivion on account of sleep, gossip, or secular matters or sense objects like music, etc., reflect on the self in thy mind. Those who want to reflect on the self for extinction of the mind should make every effort to drive away the laziness and forgetfulness through a disciplined life. They should have only moderate sleep and avoid indulging in secular matters, which distract the mind from one pointed attention. Constantly reflected on the self in the mind through one pointed attention is the chief duty of seekers of spiritual knowledge. Stanza number 6. Mata Petro Malo Adbhutam Malma Samyam Vapuhu Taktva Chandal Vaduram Brahmi Bhuya Kirti Bhav. Shunning from far away like an outcast this body which is the offspring of parental impurities and itself consists of flesh and foul matter. Be thou Brahma and attain fulfillment in thy life. One who is not disgusted with the body which is very impure in nature does not attain spiritual fulfillment in life like an outcast. This sloka cautions those part-time devotees of gods who vehemently oppose any effort to renounce family obligations. Those who entertain worldly desires like family life, etc., come under the commands of scriptures that keep only worldly welfare in view. The notion that one is born to so and so and so and so are my parents is the result of spiritual ignorance. Laghu Yoga Vasishta, chapter 20, stanza 42 also says thus: the conviction, O Rama, that I am built from head to foot by my father and mother is due to a wrong notion and leads to bondage. Wise seekers of spiritual knowledge do not become slaves of worldly desires and reject all duties that are opposed to self contemplation. Stanza number 7. Gata Akasham Mahakash Eva Atmanam Pratamni Vilape Khand Bhaven Tushnim Bhav Sada Mune. Merge the finite soul in the Supreme Self like the space enclosed by a jar in the infinite space. By means of this identity with infinite, be silent for over, O says. Stanza number 8. Savarkasam Gishtanam Swambhuva Sadatamna Brahmandapi Pinda Andam Tajyatam Malbandvat. Thou being the This is stanza number 8. Thou being the true self, the self existing Dharma, the self effulgent substratum of everything, give up the sense of reality of universe, macrocosm, and your body, microcosm, like a pot filled with filth. Negation of the reality of the universe and the body and affirmation of the reality of Brahma is the true sign of spiritual knowledge. Those who consider this universe and body as real gets entangled in mundane matters and thus they are deprived of self-knowledge. Katha Upanishad also says there is nothing other than the Atma as everything shines by the light of this Atma. Katha Upanishad chapter 2 part 2 stanza 15. Applying reason in conformance with such Shruti which reveals that the substratum of everything is Brahma, one can eliminate the superimposition of microcosm and macrocosm. Seekers of knowledge of the Supreme Spirit always live with a firm conviction that nothing has ever been created and nothing has ever been dissolved and Brahma alone exists. Thus they ceaselessly reflect on Brahma alone. Stanza number 9. Chidatamni sadanande de rudha mahendhya nivesha lingam mṛṭyu suje kevalo bhav sarvada. Transferring the sense of I, now rooted in the body, to the Atma, the being, awareness, bliss, absolute, discarding the false identity with the subtle body. Be thou ever universal, absolute, one without second, one who goes beyond by discarding the objective, gross and subjective, subtle reality of the body as perceived by egocentric senses, mind and intellect, attains Kaivalyam, universal absolute. Stanza number 10. यत्रैस्य जगद आभासो दर्पान्तः पुरं यथा तद्वह्याहमीति ज्ञात्वा कृतकृतो भवानघ. Where this reflection of the universe is like a city reflected in a mirror, realizing that you are that Brahma, attain fulfillment in thy life, O sinless one. Stanza number 11. Ahaṅkāra grahyan mukt svarupam उपपद्यते चंद्रो विमल पूर्ण सदानंद स्वयं प्रभा. He who is freed from the grip of egoism as the moon from the eclipse attains his real nature and shines in his self-effulgence, being ever pure, infinite, whole, and ever blissful. Effacement of innate impulses. Having rejected the non-self, now the effacement of latent innate impulses, vasanas, is being delineated for the attainment of liberation. Stanza number 12. क्रिया नाशा द्वे चिंता नाशो समाद्वासना अक्षय वासना प्रक्षयो मोक्ष स जीवन मुक्ति ऋष्यते. Cessation of selfish actions brings destruction of longing for sense objects, which is followed by the annihilation of desires, vasanas. The annulment of desires is liberation. This is considered as Jivan Mukti, liberation in life. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, the self which transmigrates is identified with desires alone. What he desires he resolves, what he resolves he works out, and what he works out he attains. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Bondage is due to desires, and the mind is liberated when free from desires. Desire is the cause, and selfish action is the effect. The above sloka mentions that cause desire can be destroyed by subduing the effect action. This demonstrates the necessity of renunciation of actions, including obligatory actions, for the attainment of liberation. Under the influence of innate impulses, a man perceives the object through intense thought without considering its consequences. Subdued by desires, whatever a man sees, he sees wrongly and fails to grasp the real nature of things. Completely enslaved by desires, vasanas, he perceives everything to be real, and his senses thus become extravert in pursuit of objects. The next sloka therefore now demonstrates the necessity of right perception through knowledge for the annihilation of desires. Both renunciation and knowledge are necessary for liberation. Stanza number 13. सर्वत्र सर्वतः सर्वब्रह्मात्र अवलोकनम सद्भाव भावना Dadharyam davasan le manushyate mashnute. The means to destroy the selfish action, longing for sense object and desires is to see everything, always, everywhere, and in all respect as Brahma and Brahma alone. Through strengthening the true resolve of being one with Brahma, innate impulses are annihilated. Laghu Yoga Vasisht, chapter 16, stanza 45 also says thus: desires, vasanas are dissolved by discerning the truth correctly. The desires being dissolved, the mind is extinguished even as a lamp without oil. Stanza number 14. Parmado ब्रह्मनिष्ठायां ने कर्तव्यः कदाचन परमादो मृत्युरित्या बहुर्विद्यायां ब्रह्मवादिनः. One should never be careless in one's steadfastness to Brahma. Seers of Brahma affirm that carelessness is death itself in regard to spiritual knowledge. The one who does not contemplate on Brahma invariably thinks of the sense world. The Lord in the Gita, chapter 2, stanza 62 and 63 says, by thinking of sense objects one develops attachment towards them. From attachment arises desire, and from desire anger. From anger arises delusion, from delusion perversion of memory. Due to perversion of memory, intellect perishes, and with this one comes to utter ruin. Thus, not contemplating on Brahma and thinking of sense objects is carelessness, and it is compared with death for spiritual aspirants, says Sanat Sujata in the Udyog Parva of the Mahabharata. Chapter 41, stanza 4 also says that death results from delusion of the body, which arises because of fall from one's own true nature. Eternal vigilance grants immortality. Stanza 15. Yatha krishtam shivalam akshamatram ne tishtati avranoti tatha maya pragyam vapi pragmukham. As moss, even if cleared from water, does not cease to grow for a moment but covers it water again, so too Maya envelops even a wise man if his senses are extravert, averse to contemplation on the self. There is no greater danger for aspirants than the carelessness in restraining the senses from going outward. All senses must be restrained in order to protect the discriminative knowledge that has arisen. For even one of the roving senses, if the mind yields to it, carries away discrimination, as a gale carries away a ship on the waters. The Lord in the Gita, chapter 2, stanza 68 has declared thus: his wisdom is steady whose all senses have been withdrawn from their respective objects. There is no greater sadhana than withdrawing the senses from their respective objects. Stanza 16. Jivato yasya केवलयं विदेहो अपि स केवलः समाधि समाधिनिष्ठतामेत्य निर्विकल्पो भवानग. One who dwells in absolute oneness with Brahma while alive continues to be in absolute oneness with Brahma even after the fall of the body. O sinless one, establishing yourself in samadhi, superconscious state, ever remain devoid of any other thought. People adopt various means for liberation. The wisest contemplate on the reality of Brahma, the middling ones contemplate on scripture, low people think of mantras, the lowest are deluded by the efficacy of the holy places. Mṛṭyu Upanishad, chapter 2, stanza number 22. Seer of this Upanishad avers the philosophy of non-dualism and vouch for nirvikalpa samadhi that leads to sadhyo mukti, liberation here and now. Wise seekers resort to intense concentration on the real by withdrawing from the objective and subjective worlds and attain the absolute, but followers of philosophy of dualism and qualified non-dualism travel to Brahmaloka after the fall of the body and attain relative immortality. They do not attain Kevalya Mukti, absolute liberation through non-dual knowledge alone. Kevala Mukti is attained. Stanza number 17. अज्ञान हृदय ग्रंथिन शेष विलयस्तदा समाधिना विकल्पेन यदा द्वैता आत्म दर्शनम. When the non-dual Atma is realized by means of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, then the heart's knot of ignorance is completely destroyed. Samadhi is the result of infinite religious austerities. There are some schools of thought who condemn samadhi and advise seekers to engage in selfless worldly activities without desire. But this view is not true because through samadhi alone all desires are destroyed. Some people argue that although samadhi is superior to worldly activities, yet if it is fraught with desires, then it is inferior to desireless worldly activities. But there also arises no defect because such meditation with desire cannot be called samadhi. If both the man absorbed in samadhi and the man engaged in worldly activities are enlightened and desireless, then also this nirvikalpa samadhi is superior because it protects jivan mukti by bringing about dissolution of mind and effacement of all desires. Without entering into argument about comparative merits and demerits of various paths, this Upanishad recommends Nirvikalpa Samadhi for the knowledge of the Supreme Spirit. Stanza number 18. Atratam tavam dridi kurvan madiso sante jane udasintaya teso tishthedat patadidut. Firmly convinced of one's identity with this superconsciousness state and rejecting the identification with the egoism and the rest, one should remain indifferent to them, as in the case of pot, cloth, etc. No one identifies oneself with a pot or cloth. Exposition of non-dual self. Having defended the efficacy of Nirvikalpa Samadhi for the final emancipation, Now commences the exposition on non-dual self as experienced by the teacher in Samadhi. Stanza number 19. Brahmadi Stambh Priyantam Mirsa Matra Upadhay Tatah Purnam Savam Atmanam Pasyadekatmana Sithitam. All the differentiating adjuncts from Brahma down to a clump of grass are unreal. Therefore, one should realize one's own infinite self as the absolute one, being not a relative entity like other gods. Brahma, the presiding deity of collective causal bodies, is considered as a very high state by the followers of dualistic philosophy. This is true in case of relative state, but when envisioned from the absolute state of samadhi, this state, including lordship over all the 14 lower worlds, appear to be unreal. Therefore, the wise one who has developed intense vairagya does not aspire for any relative state and constantly abides in the self alone, which is absolute. Stanza number 20. Swam Brahma, Swam Vishnu, Swam Indra, Swam Shiva. Swam Visvamidam Sarvam Savsamadhyannah Kinchan. The self itself is Brahma, the self itself is Vishnu, the self itself is Indra, the self itself is Shiva, and the self itself is this entire universe. There is nothing else other than the self. Kaivalya Upanishad also says, seeing the Atma in all beings and all beings in the Atma, one attains the highest Brahma not by any other means. The next sloka further illustrates the imperative need to eliminate all other false appearances for attaining Brahma. Stanza number 21. सब आत्मनु आरोपितो शेष भासु स्तुति निरासतः स्वमेव परम ब्रह्म पूर्णं मदीयं क्रियम्. By the elimination of all impure objective appearances superimposed upon one's own self, one remains as the Supreme Brahma, the infinite non-dual and actionless. Impurity is the result of the identification of the self with finite objective appearances like the body, etc. When mind is gradually withdrawn from objective appearances in samadhi, there remains nothing to think. Then the mind is rendered pure and attains identity with Brahma. Stanza 22. Asat Asatkalpo Vikalpo Ayam Visvam Nityakevastoni Nirvikare Nirakare Nirvisese Bhidakutah. The imagination of the universe in the one entity Brahma is a asatkalpa, mere appearance but not real, as in the case of a mirage. Where can be any diversity in that which is chargeless, formless, and qualityless? Through constant practice of samadhi, all perceptions vanish from the mind and it abides in the formless reality. In the state of duality, no view can be said to be conclusive in itself because it will only be partial view, but reality perceived in the state of non-duality is conclusive and final. The ultimate reality is formless alone. Brahma Sutra. It is absurd to think of the phenomenal world in that non-dual state. It is asat, non-existent like water in mirage. Stanza number 23. दृष्टि दर्शन दृश्यादि भाव शून्य निरामय कल्पार्णव इवात्यन्यम परिपूर्णे चिदात्मनि. In the one entity devoid of distinctions of seer, seeing and seen, and free from all sufferings, in the absolutely full, all pervasive spiritual self, like the ocean at the time of cosmic deluge, where can there be any diversity? तेजस्वीतमो यत्र वलिनं भ्रांति कारणम् अद्वितीये परे तत्वे निर्विशेषे भिदा कुतः. This is stanza number 24. Where can there be any diversity when the ignorance which is the cause of delusion is dissolved like darkness in light in the supreme reality, the one without a second and qualityless absolute. Stanza number 25. एकात्मके परे तत्वे भेदकर्तां कथं वसेत् सुसुप्तो सुखमात्रायां भेदः केनावलोकितः. In this supreme reality, which is one and homogeneous, how can the agent of difference exist? In the state of profound sleep, dreamless sleep, characterized by pure bliss, who has perceived difference? Stanza number 26. चित्तमूलो विकल्पो अयं चित्ता भावेन कश्चन अतचित्तं समाधेहि प्रत्यगरूपे परात्मनि. The mind is the source of this sense of difference, apparent universe. When the mind ceases to exist, there is none. Therefore, merge the mind by concentrating it on the innermost supreme self. Stanza number 27. अखंड आनंद आत्मानं विज्ञाय स्वस्वरूपतः बहिरंत सदा आनंद शाश्वत आत्मनि. Realizing the blissful infinite Atma as his real nature, he experiences eternal bliss in his mind, eternally as well as externally. So, I conclude this video at this stage. Next video will continue on Adhyatma Upanishad. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, my dear friends. Thank you.